Most people think fairy tales are about knights saving princesses. They're wrong. Sometimes the princess saves the monster, and she doesn't realize that freeing the beast is far more dangerous than leaving him in chains. When Sarah Miller cut the silver shackles off that dying wolf in the Blackwood forest, she thought she was performing an act of mercy. She didn't know she was unleashing Dominic Blackwood, the exiled Alpha King of the Pacific Pack. She didn't know that by touching his blood, she was signing a contract with fate. He didn't just say thank you. He looked at her with golden eyes, shifted into a man, and claimed her right there in the mud. Mercy has a price, and Sarah was about to pay it with her freedom. The rain in Oregon didn't wash things clean. It just made the mud deeper. Sarah Miller pulled her raincoat tighter around her frame as she navigated the steep ridge behind her family's property. Technically, she wasn't supposed to be this far out. The land bordering the Miller farm belonged to a private holding company, Blackwood Enterprises, and the locals in town whispered that the owners were militant about trespassers. But Sarah needed the silence. At 24, she felt like her life was already shrinking. She was working 2 waitress jobs to pay off her father's gambling debts, living in the guest cottage of her childhood home, and trying to ignore the fact that her ex-boyfriend, Kyle, was still stalking her social media. The woods were the only place Kyle wouldn't follow her. She heard the sound before she saw the source. It wasn't a bark, and it wasn't a howl. It was a low, vibrating whimper that seemed to shake the wet pine needles on the ground. Sarah froze, her boots sinking into the sludge. Bears were common this time of year, but this sound was too high-pitched, too desperate. Against her better judgment, she moved toward a ravine obscured by thick blackberry brambles. What she saw at the bottom of the ravine made her breath hitch in her throat. It was a wolf, but calling it a wolf felt like an insult to the sheer size of the creature. It was massive, easily the size of a small pony, with fur the color of midnight, matted with mud and blood. But it wasn't just caught in a hunter's trap. It was staked to the ground. Thick, rusted iron chains were wrapped around the creature's paws and neck, staked into the bedrock with industrial bolts. The chains looked old, but the wounds where they dug into the animal's flesh were fresh. The wolf was panting heavily, its flank rising and falling in a jagged rhythm. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, sliding down the muddy embankment. The wolf's head snapped up. Its eyes were shocking, pure, molten gold. They didn't look like animal eyes. They possessed a terrifying, human-like intelligence. It snarled, baring teeth that looked capable of snapping her arm like a twig. "I'm not going to hurt you," Sarah said, her voice trembling. She held her hands up. "I'm not with them. Whoever did this, I'm not with them." The wolf watched her. It didn't relax, but it stopped growling. It seemed to be assessing her, judging the threat level. Sarah got closer and saw the true cruelty of the trap. The chains weren't just iron. They had a strange, iridescent sheen to them, and wherever they touched the wolf's skin, the fur was burned away, leaving blistered, red raw flesh. The smell was acrid, like burning hair and ozone. "I can't open these with my hands," Sarah muttered, panic rising in her chest. She looked around. She had a multi-tool in her pocket, but that wouldn't cut industrial chain. Then she remembered the old logging shed, about half a mile back. Her dad used to keep heavy bolt cutters there for the fence line. "Stay here," she told the wolf, feeling ridiculous for talking to it. "I'm going to get help. Do not die on me." The wolf let out a huff, resting its massive head back onto the mud. It looked exhausted, defeated. Sarah ran. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs felt like lead. She made it to the shed, smashed the rusty padlock with a rock, and grabbed the heavy, orange-handled bolt cutters. They weighed 20 pounds, but she sprinted back to the ravine as if she were carrying a feather. When she slid back down to the wolf, the animal's eyes were closed. "Hey! Wake up!" Sarah shouted, dropping to her knees in the mud. The gold eyes fluttered open. "I'm going to cut you loose," she said, positioning the jaws of the cutter over the chain binding its front right paw. "This is going to be loud." She clamped down. The metal was incredibly hard. Sarah gritted her teeth, putting her entire body weight onto the handles. She screamed with the effort, her muscles straining. Snap! The link broke. The wolf flinched, but didn't bite. Sarah moved to the next paw, then the back legs. It took her 20 minutes of agonizing struggle. Her hands were blistered, her raincoat soaked through. Finally, she moved to the collar, a thick band of that same burning metal around its throat. This was the most dangerous part. She had to put her face inches from the predator's jaws. "Please don't bite my face off," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The wolf looked at her. For a split second, the golden eyes seemed to soften. It tilted its chin up, exposing the lock, giving her access. It was an act of submission or trust. Sarah clamped the cutters. She pushed, she shoved. With a final metallic clang, the collar split open. The wolf scrambled backward immediately, shaking its body violently. The sound of heavy fur slapping against skin echoed in the ravine. It stood up on shaky legs, towering over Sarah, who was still on her knees. Now that it was free, the fear came rushing back. Sarah realized she was alone in a ravine with a wounded apex predator. "Go on," she whispered, pointing up the ridge. "Go home." The wolf didn't leave. It took a step toward her, then another. It lowered its head and pressed its wet nose against her neck, inhaling deeply. Sarah froze, terrified. The creature let out a low rumble that vibrated through her chest bone. Then, without warning, the wolf's legs buckled. It collapsed sideways, landing with a heavy thud in the mud, unconscious. Sarah stared at it. She couldn't leave it here. If the people who chained it came back, they would kill it. "Damn it," she hissed. She wasn't strong enough to carry it, but she had a tarp in the shed. If she could drag it. It took Sarah 2 hours to drag the unconscious beast onto the tarp and pull it to the hidden storm cellar underneath the guest cottage. It was grueling, back-breaking work. She didn't know why she was doing it. Maybe it was because she knew what it felt like to be trapped. She got the wolf into the cellar, laid it on a pile of old blankets, and locked the door. She rushed upstairs to get water, antiseptic, and bandages. When she came back down 10 minutes later, the wolf was gone. Lying on the blankets, naked, shivering, and covered in mud and blood, was a man. Sarah dropped the basin of water. It crashed onto the concrete floor, splashing water everywhere. The man on the floor groaned and tried to sit up, but failed. He was huge, even in human form. He had to be 6'4", with shoulders that spanned the width of the cot. His hair was black and shaggy, matching the wolf's fur, and his body was a roadmap of scars, fresh burns, and corded muscle. He wasn't just a man. He was the man. Sarah recognized him, not from the town, but from the news. It was a face she had seen on the cover of Forbes and in the local papers regarding land disputes. Dominic Blackwood, the CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, the billionaire recluse who owned half the county. "Water," he rasped. His voice was deep, sounding like gravel grinding together. Sarah stood paralyzed. You were a wolf." Dominic opened his eyes. They were still that piercing, unnatural gold. Water. Her survival instinct kicked in over her confusion. She grabbed a plastic water bottle from the emergency shelf and uncapped it, kneeling beside him but keeping a safe distance. She handed it to him. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't grip it. "Here," Sarah said, her voice steadying. She held the bottle to his lips. He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin and onto his chest, washing away streaks of mud. When the bottle was empty, he slumped back. "Silver," he muttered. "The chains. Silver nitrate alloy. It poisons the blood." I have a first aid kit," Sarah stammered, "but I don't know how to treat whatever this is." "My healing," Dominic gritted out, his jaw clenched in pain. "It's slow. The poison blocks it. I need food, meat, raw meat," Sarah blinked. "And I need you to stay," he added, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist. His grip was weak, but his skin was burning hot. "Don't leave the cellar. They're tracking the scent." "Who?" "My brother!" Dominic spat the word like a curse. "Silas!" Sarah's mind was reeling. Silas Blackwood was the public face of the company, the charming younger brother who hosted the charity galas. "I need to get you to a hospital," Sarah said, trying to pull her wrist back. "No hospitals!" Dominic roared, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. He coughed, wincing. "If I go to a hospital, Silas will find me. He'll finish what he started. He staged a coup, poisoned me at the pack meeting, dragged me to the woods." He looked at Sarah, his gaze intense and predatory. "You freed me. You touched the silver chains. Why didn't they burn you?" "Why would chains burn me?" Sarah asked, confused. Dominic narrowed his eyes. "You're human. A pure human." "Yes, obviously." He let out a dark, dry chuckle. "A human saved the Alpha King. The Fates have a twisted sense of humor." He squeezed her wrist, pulling her slightly closer. "Listen to me, Sarah. I saw your name on your work badge. You are in danger now. Because you touched me. Because you freed me. My scent is on you. Silas will smell it. He will come for you to get to me." "Great," Sarah said sarcastically, masking her terror. "So I'm an accessory to a werewolf civil war, just what I needed on a Tuesday." She stood up. "I have hamburger meat in the fridge upstairs. I'll get it. But you stay here. If you shift into a wolf again and eat my landlord, I'm evicted." Dominic watched her go, a strange expression on his face. He didn't tell her the other reason he needed her to stay. He didn't tell her that, when she had touched him in the woods, the pain of the silver had vanished for a second, replaced by a spark of warmth that every wolf recognizes but few ever find. He didn't tell her that he wasn't just planning to hide here. He was planning to keep her. Sarah returned with 2 pounds of raw ground beef on a plate. It was gross, but Dominic ate it with a savagery that reminded her he was not human. As he ate, color began to return to his skin. The angry red burns where the chains had been began to steam, the skin knitting together before her eyes. "Better," he sighed, wiping his mouth. He sat up, swinging his legs off the cot. The blanket slipped, and Sarah quickly looked away, cheeks flushing. "There are clothes in the bin over there," she pointed. "My dad's old stuff. Might be tight, but it's better than nothing." Dominic stood up, unashamed of his nakedness, and walked to the bin. He pulled on a pair of old grey sweatpants. They were short on his ankles, but they covered him. He turned to her, and the atmosphere in the small cellar shifted. The air suddenly felt heavy, charged with static electricity. "Sarah," he said. He took 2 strides and was standing right in front of her. The heat radiating off him was immense. "What?" she breathed, backing up until she hit the wall. "You saved my life. By the laws of my pack, I owe you a life debt." He placed a hand on the wall beside her head, boxing her in. He leaned down, his nose grazing the sensitive skin of her neck, right over her pulse. Sarah gasped. She should have pushed him away. She should have run. But her body betrayed her. She felt a jolt of attraction, so strong it made her knees weak. "But it's more than that," Dominic whispered against her skin. "When I was in the chains, I was feral. I was ready to die. Then I smelled you. You smell like rain and vanilla. It's just cheap shampoo," she managed to say. "No," he growled low in his throat. "It's a mate scent." Before Sarah could ask what that meant, Dominic pulled back slightly. His eyes were swirling with gold and black. "Silas is coming," he said, his voice hard. "I can feel his scouts crossing the perimeter. I can't fight them all in this condition. Not yet." "So we run?" Sarah asked. "No, we bond," Dominic said. "If I mark you, my power flows into you, and your strength, it grounds me. It will jumpstart my healing instantly. It hides your human scent and masks us both under the Alpha authority." "Mark me? You mean like a tattoo?" Dominic looked at her lips. "A bite on the marking spot between your shoulder and neck." Sarah's eyes widened. "You want to bite me?" "It's the only way to save us both, Sarah. If they find you as a human, they kill you. If they find you as my mate, they have to challenge me for you by law. It buys us time." A heavy thud sounded from the floor above them. Someone had broken into the cottage upstairs. Heavy boots were walking across the floorboards. "They're here," Dominic hissed. He looked at her, his expression desperate. "Sarah, trust me." Sarah looked at the ceiling, hearing the footsteps pause, then head toward the cellar door. She looked back at Dominic, the man who had been a monster. The monster who was a man. "Do it," she whispered. Dominic didn't hesitate. He grabbed her waist, spun her around, and swept her hair off her shoulder. "This will hurt," he warned. Then he sank his teeth into the curve of her neck. The pain was white-hot, like a branding iron pressed against her skin. Sarah cried out, her nails digging into Dominic's bare shoulders, drawing blood. But just as quickly as the pain registered, it vanished, replaced by a rush of endorphins, so potent her knees gave out completely. It wasn't just adrenaline. It felt like liquid gold was being poured into her veins. Her senses, usually dull and human, sharpened violently. She could hear the individual raindrops hitting the cellar door outside. She could smell the rust on the pipes, the copper tang of blood, and beneath it all the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of Dominic. Cedar, rain, and raw power. Dominic pulled back, his chest heaving. A smear of her blood stained his lips. His eyes were no longer just gold. They were glowing in the dim light of the cellar. The wounds on his torso didn't just heal. They vanished, leaving behind smooth olive skin. "It is done," he growled, his voice vibrating through her bones. Boom! The cellar door at the top of the stairs didn't open. It exploded inward. Wood splinters rained down the concrete steps. "Check the corners! He's weak!" a voice shouted from the smoke. 3 men descended the stairs. They wore tactical gear, black vests, heavy boots, and they carried assault rifles. These weren't just pack members. They were a hit squad. Dominic didn't wait. He didn't shift into a wolf. There was no room. Instead, he moved with a speed that defied physics. He launched himself at the first man. There was a sickening crunch as Dominic's fist connected with the man's tactical helmet, shattering the visor and the face beneath it. The man crumpled without a sound. "Contact!" the second man screamed, raising his rifle. Sarah screamed, "Dominic, left!" She didn't know how she knew. She just felt the second man's finger tightening on the trigger before he did it. Dominic pivoted instantly, using the falling body of the first attacker as a shield. Bullets thudded into the dead man's vest. Dominic roared, a sound half human, half beast, and ripped a copper pipe from the wall with his bare hand. Steam hissed into the room. He swung the pipe like a baseball bat. It connected with the second gunman's ribs, folding him in half. The man went flying across the small room, smashing into the shelves of canned preserves. Glass shattered, mixing with the blood on the floor. The third man, the leader, hesitated. He saw Dominic, covered in blood, eyes glowing, holding a steaming pipe, and he saw the mark on Sarah's neck. "You marked a human?" the leader sneered, reaching for a silver knife on his belt. "That's against the covenant, Blackwood. You've tainted the bloodline." "I am the covenant," Dominic snarled. The man lunged at Sarah, knowing she was the weak link. "No!" Dominic's voice was like thunder. He didn't hit the man. He grabbed him by the throat, lifting him 2 feet off the ground. The mercenary clawed at Dominic's arm, kicking wildly. But Dominic was immovable, like a statue of marble and rage. "Tell Silas," Dominic whispered, bringing the man's face close to his own, "that he missed." Dominic threw the man. He didn't just toss him, he hurled him with terrifying force against the concrete foundation. The man hit the wall with a wet thud and slid down, motionless. Silence fell over the cellar, broken only by the hissing steam pipe and Sarah's ragged breathing. Dominic turned to her. The golden glow in his eyes faded slightly, returning to a deep, intense amber. He stepped over the bodies, oblivious to the carnage, and cupped her face in his blood-stained hands. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, scanning her body for injuries. I'm fine," Sarah stammered, though her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She looked at the bodies. "You killed them. They're dead. Oh my God, the police." "The police are on Silas's payroll," Dominic said grimly. "And these weren't people, Sarah. They were rogue wolves hired for a purge. Look," Sarah looked down. The men's faces were shifting in death, their jaws elongating, hair sprouting from their skin before receding. They looked monstrous. "We have to go," Dominic said, grabbing a heavy coat from the hook on the wall, her father's old hunting jacket. He draped it over his bare shoulders. "My car was destroyed when they took me. We need a vehicle." "My truck," Sarah said, her mind racing. "It's an old Ford F-150. It's parked behind the barn." Dominic grabbed her hand. A jolt of electricity shot up her arm, calming her panic instantly. It was the bond. He was feeding her his strength. "Drive," he said. "Get us to the city, to the tower." The drive into Seattle took 3 hours. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, which was a blessing. It washed away the scent of their trail. Sarah drove with white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. Beside her, Dominic Blackwood, the billionaire Alpha King, looked utterly out of place in the passenger seat of her rusted 2015 Ford. He was shirtless under the open hunting jacket, his chest rising and falling slowly as he meditated, forcing his body to metabolize the last of the silver poison. Every time Sarah looked at him, she felt a pull in her chest, like a magnet dragging her toward him. It was terrifying. She had known this man for less than 6 hours, and yet she felt like she would drive this truck off a cliff if he asked her to. "Stop staring," Dominic murmured, his eyes still closed. "Keep your eyes on the road, Sarah." "I'm not staring," she lied. "I'm checking for tails. There are none. The storm is masking us." He opened his eyes. "Tell me about yourself. If we are to survive this, I need to know who I've bound my soul to." "There's not much to tell," Sarah said, focusing on the windshield wipers. "I'm 24. I dropped out of nursing school when my dad got sick. He died last year. Mum left when I was a kid. I work double shifts at the Rusty Spoon diner to keep the bank from taking the farm. Nursing school, Dominic noted. That explains why you didn't faint when you saw the blood. I've seen worse, she said quietly. My dad. The gambling sharks weren't kind when he missed payments. Dominic's jaw tightened. Debts. Money. It's always the shackle humans wear. He reached over and placed his hand on her thigh. It was a possessive, heavy weight. The farm is safe now. The bank won't touch it. I own the bank. Sarah laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. You're joking. I never joke about assets, Dominic said. You saved the Alpha. The debt is paid. They reached the city limits of Seattle just after midnight. The skyline was a blur of lights through the rain. Dominic directed her, not to a hotel, but to the Blackwood Spire, the tallest, most imposing glass needle in the city. Pull into the underground cargo entrance, he instructed. Code 99 Alpha. Sarah punched the code into the keypad. The heavy steel gates rolled open. She drove the dirty truck into a pristine garage filled with Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and armored SUVs. They took a private elevator that required Dominic's thumbprint and a retina scan. The elevator shot up 80 stories in seconds. When the doors opened, Sarah stepped out into a penthouse that was larger than her entire farm. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking the city. The furniture was sleek, dark, Italian leather. It was cold, masculine, and screamed of lonely power. Jarvis, Dominic said to the empty air. Lockdown mode, level 5 security. Confirmed, Mr. Blackwood, a robotic voice answered. Heavy steel shutters began to descend over the glass windows, sealing them in. Dominic walked to a wet bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He downed one in a single gulp and brought the other to Sarah. Drink, he said. It's bourbon. It will help with the shock. Sarah took the glass but didn't drink. She walked to the massive flat-screen TV on the wall, which was playing a muted news channel. She froze. Dominic, she whispered. Look. He turned. On the screen was a photo of Sarah. It was her driver's license photo. The headline underneath read, Breaking News. Local waitress sought for questioning in double homicide. Sarah grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Police are searching for Sarah Miller, 24, seen fleeing the scene of a brutal altercation at the Miller property earlier tonight. Sources allege Miller may be connected to an eco-terrorist group targeting Blackwood Enterprises. Authorities warn she is armed and dangerous. He's fast, Dominic murmured, his face darkening. Silas controls the media outlets in the Pacific Northwest. He's framing you to flush you out. If the police catch you, he'll have his men intercept the transport. Sarah dropped the glass. It shattered on the marble floor. I'm a murderer. I'm a terrorist. I've never even held a gun. She began to hyperventilate. The reality was crashing down. Her life, her quiet, struggling, honest life, was gone. She was a fugitive. Dominic was beside her in an instant. He didn't offer soft comforts. He grabbed her shoulders and spun her around to face him. Look at me, he commanded. The alpha tone forced her to obey. She locked eyes with him. That girl on the news? Dominic said, his voice fierce. She doesn't exist anymore. Sarah the waitress is dead. You are the alpha's mate now. You are untouchable by their laws. They don't care about your laws, Sarah cried. They have guns and news cameras. And I have an empire, Dominic growled. Silas made a mistake. He tried to destroy you to get to me. He made it personal. Dominic pulled her against his chest. He felt like a wall of granite. Go shower, he ordered gently, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. Wash off the mud and the blood. There are clothes in the master closet. My ex-fiancé left things here years ago. Find something. When you come out, we are going to burn Silas's reputation to the ground. Your ex-fiancé? Sarah asked, a sudden, irrational spike of jealousy cutting through her fear. Dominic smirked, a dangerous, wolfish grin. A political arrangement. She lacked spine. She certainly never cut me out of iron chains with bolt cutters. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. The spot where his lips touched burned pleasantly. "Go," he said. "I have calls to make. The king is back on the board, and tonight the pieces start falling." Sarah walked toward the bathroom, her legs heavy. She paused at the doorway and looked back. Dominic was already on a secure phone, his voice dropping into a cold, lethal register as he issued orders. She realized then that she hadn't just saved a wolf. She had saved a warlord. And now, she was his queen. The shower in the master suite was larger than Sarah's entire kitchen back at the cottage. It was a cavern of black marble and rainfall heads that poured water from the ceiling. Sarah stood under the scalding spray for 20 minutes, watching the water swirl down the drain. First, it ran brown with the mud of the Blackwood forest. Then, it ran pink with the blood of the men Dominic had killed. Finally, it ran clear. She scrubbed her skin until it was raw, trying to wash away the feeling of the tactical vest pressing against her chest when that man had tried to kill her. But she couldn't wash away the mark. She stepped out of the shower and wiped the steam from the mirror. There it was. Located right where her neck met her shoulder, the skin was raised and angry. It wasn't just a bite mark. It was a scar that formed a pattern. The teeth marks had cauterized into a shape that looked vaguely like a crown of thorns. When she touched it, a shiver raced down her spine. Not of cold, but of awareness. She could feel him. It was the strangest sensation of her life. In the back of her mind, there was a low, steady thrumming, like a bass note in a song. It was Dominic. She could feel his location in the penthouse. He was in the study. She could feel his rage, a cold, controlled burn, and she could feel his protectiveness over her, a heavy, suffocating blanket. "This is insane," she whispered to her reflection. "I'm a waitress. I serve pancakes. I don't do blood pacts." She wrapped herself in a plush white robe and walked into the closet Dominic had mentioned. It wasn't a closet, it was a boutique. Rows of designer suits, shelves of watches, and a section clearly dedicated to female companions. Dominic had said it belonged to his ex, but the tags were still on everything. It was a showroom of wealth. "Wear the red one." Sarah jumped, spinning around. Dominic was leaning against the doorframe. He had showered and changed. The savage, blood-covered wolf was gone. In his place stood a titan of industry. He wore a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, midnight blue, tailored so perfectly it looked like a second skin. His hair was slicked back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, but his eyes still held that dangerous, golden flicker. "I didn't hear you come in," Sarah said, clutching the robe tighter. "You won't," Dominic said, walking into the room. "I'm a predator, Sarah. Silence is my default state." He pointed to a garment bag hanging in the center. "The red one. It's an Ely Saab. Put it on." "I'm not playing dress-up, Dominic," Sarah snapped, her fear turning into defensive anger. "My face is on the news. They're calling me a cop killer. I need a lawyer, not a gown." Dominic stopped in front of her. He reached out and adjusted the collar of her robe, his knuckles grazing her skin. The sensation made her breath hitch. "Silas controls the lawyers," Dominic said, his voice calm but intense. "He controls the police commissioner. If you turn yourself in, you will hang yourself in your cell before morning. It will be ruled a suicide caused by guilt." Sarah went cold. "So what do we do?" "We control the narrative," Dominic said. "Tonight is the Winter Solstice Gala at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. It is the most important night of the year for the Pacific Pac and the business elite. Every major CEO, politician, and Pac Alpha from the West Coast will be there. And Silas expects me to be dead in a ditch. He expects you to be running through the woods, terrified. He is planning to announce his succession tonight. He will claim I died of a sudden heart failure. Dominic's eyes narrowed. Instead, we are going to walk through the front door. We are going to show them that the king is alive. And we are going to show them that I have chosen a mate. By wolf law, once I present you publicly, you are under the protection of the crown. If the police touch you then, it is an act of war against the entire werewolf nation. They won't risk it. You want me to walk into a room full of monsters and pretend to be your queen? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I don't want you to pretend, Dominic said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. He snapped it open. Inside lay a necklace that looked heavy just sitting there. It was a choker made of platinum, encrusted with diamonds. But in the center sat a stone the size of a quail egg. It wasn't a diamond. It was moonstone, swirling with milky blues and purples. This has been in the Blackwood family for 400 years, Dominic said, taking it out. Turn around. Sarah obeyed, lifting her damp hair. She felt the cold metal touch her throat, covering the marking spot. Dominic clasped it. It masks your human scent, he explained, his hands lingering on her shoulders. To them you will smell like ozone and power. Like me. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. You saved me when I was nothing but a dying animal in the mud. You have more courage in your little finger than Silas has in his entire army. Do not fear them, Sarah. You hold the leash of the Alpha King. That makes you the most dangerous person in the room. Sarah looked in the mirror. The necklace glittered. Her eyes looked wider, darker. She didn't look like Sarah Miller from the trailer park anymore. Okay, she whispered, feeling a strange surge of steel entering her spine. Perhaps the bond feeding her his confidence. Let's go crash a party. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel was a fortress of old-world luxury in downtown Seattle. Tonight, however, it was surrounded by a phalanx of black SUVs, paparazzi, and security teams that looked more like paramilitary units. The rain was coming down in sheets, flashing white in the strobes of the cameras. Inside the back of the armored Rolls-Royce, Sarah's heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She smoothed the skirt of the red silk gown. It was strapless, featuring a daring slit up the thigh, and fit her curves with scandalous precision. Breathe, Dominic commanded from the seat beside her. He took her hand. His palm was warm, rough, and steady. Let the bond anchor you. Draw from me. Sarah closed her eyes and inhaled. She visualized the bond, that golden thread connecting them. She pulled on it. Immediately, her heart rate slowed, her hearing sharpened. She could hear the distinct clicks of the cameras outside the soundproof glass. She could hear the murmur of the valet. Ready? Dominic asked. No, Sarah said. But let's do it anyway. The driver opened the door. The noise was instantaneous, a wall of sound, shouts, flashes, the roar of the city. Dominic stepped out first. He buttoned his jacket, stood to his full height, and scanned the crowd. The reaction was immediate. The paparazzi, who had been shouting questions about Silas Blackwood, went dead silent for a heartbeat. Dominic Blackwood. The man supposed to be dead. He turned and offered his hand to the dark interior of the car. Sarah took it. She stepped out, the red dress spilling onto the wet pavement like a pool of blood. She stood beside him, lifting her chin. The flashbulbs erupted like a supernova. Mr. Blackwood, is it true you're stepping down? Who is the woman? Is that Sarah Miller, the suspect? Dominic ignored them all. He placed a hand on the small of Sarah's back and guided her toward the golden doors. The security team, Silas's men, looked at Dominic with undisguised terror. They parted like the Red Sea. No one dared to stop the Alpha King. They entered the grand ballroom. If the outside was chaotic, the inside was a vacuum of tension. Underneath crystal chandeliers the size of small cars, hundreds of people in tuxedos and gowns were mingling. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and something else Sarah could now identify. Musk, the scent of wolves. As Dominic and Sarah stepped onto the balcony overlooking the dance floor, the music didn't stop, but the conversation did. A ripple of silence spread outward from the entrance until the entire room was quiet. In the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne and laughing with the police commissioner, stood Silas Blackwood. He looked like a younger, softer version of Dominic. Where Dominic was hard angles and scars, Silas was smooth skin and charming smiles. But to Sarah's heightened senses, he smelled like rot, like spoiled meat covered in sugar. Silas looked up. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers and shattered on the parquet floor. "Music," Dominic said, his voice not loud, yet carrying to every corner of the room. "I believe I'm late for the first dance." He led Sarah down the grand staircase. Every eye was glued to them. Sarah felt like she was walking on a tightrope over a pit of vipers. She tightened her grip on Dominic's arm. "They are afraid of you," Dominic's voice echoed in her head. "Don't look down. Look at Silas." They reached the floor. The crowd backed away, creating a wide circle around the two brothers. Silas recovered his composure quickly. He stepped forward, a fake, tight smile plastered on his face. "Brother," Silas said, opening his arms. We were told there was an accident, a helicopter crash. We were preparing a memorial." "I'm sure you were," Dominic said, stopping 3 feet from him. The air between them shimmered with heat. "I'm sure the eulogy was prepared weeks ago, before you poisoned my drink at the Equinox meeting." Gasps rippled through the crowd. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a formal accusation of treason. Silas's eyes flashed red, the color of a challenger. "You are delirious, Dominic. The poison must be in your mind. And who is this?" He turned his sneer toward Sarah. "You bring a human fugitive to the solstice? A cop killer?" "She is not a fugitive," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a growl. "And she is not just a human." Dominic reached up and unclasped the moonstone necklace from Sarah's throat. It fell into his hand. He tossed it aside. The scent hit the room instantly. Rain, vanilla, and the undeniable, heavy iron tang of the alpha mark. "She is my mate," Dominic declared. "I have marked her. I have claimed her. Her blood is my blood. Her life is my life." The silence was absolute. Marking a human was rare, dangerous, but once done, it was sacred law. To harm a mate was to challenge the alpha himself. Silas's face twisted into ugly rage. His plan was crumbling. He couldn't kill Dominic in front of the entire assembly, and he couldn't arrest Sarah now without starting a civil war. He had only one card left to play: dominance. Silas stepped closer to Sarah, ignoring Dominic. He drew himself up, channeling his alpha aura. It was a psychic weight, a crushing pressure used to force submission. "Kneel," Silas commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an alpha command. It was a wave of force designed to shatter a human's will, to force their brain to shut down and their body to collapse. Around the circle, several human servers dropped to their knees, fainting from the peripheral pressure. Sarah felt it hit her like a physical slap. Her knees buckled, her vision blurred. A voice in her head screamed, "Submit! Obey!" She started to sink. Dominic moved to catch her, snarling, ready to tear Silas's throat out. But then, something happened. Sarah felt a heat in her chest. Not the golden heat of Dominic's bond, but something else. Something older. It felt like silver fire in her veins. It started in her gut and shot up to her eyes. No, she thought. I don't kneel to dog murderers. Sarah stopped falling. She locked her legs. With a gasp that sounded like a sob, she forced herself to stand upright. She lifted her head, fighting the crushing weight of Silas's power. She looked Silas dead in the eye. "Go to hell!" she spat. The shock on Silas's face was comical. No human could resist a direct alpha command. It was biologically impossible. The room erupted in whispers. "Did you see that?" She resisted. "How is she standing?" Dominic looked at Sarah, and for the first time, there was genuine shock in his golden eyes. He saw something the others didn't. When Sarah had resisted, her irises hadn't stayed brown. For a fleeting second, they had flashed a brilliant, luminous violet. Silas stumbled back, his nose beginning to bleed, the backlash of a broken command. "She's not human," Silas whispered, wiping the blood. "What is she?" Dominic didn't know, but he knew an opportunity when he saw one. He stepped in front of Sarah, shielding her, his chest swelling with pride and a newfound curiosity. "She is the Alpha Queen," Dominic announced, his voice thundering through the ballroom. "And this discussion is over." He turned to the police commissioner, who was trembling by the buffet table. "Commissioner," Dominic said pleasantly, "my brother seems unwell. He is bleeding. Perhaps he should be escorted out before he hurts himself? And regarding the charges against my mate, I assume the evidence has been reviewed and found lacking?" The commissioner looked at Dominic, then at the terrified Silas, and finally at the woman who had just defied a wolf lord. "Yes," the commissioner squeaked. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Clearly a clerical error. We will issue a retraction immediately." Dominic wrapped his arm around Sarah's waist. She was trembling now, the adrenaline fading, leaving her exhausted. "Come," he whispered to her. "The show is over, but the war has just begun." As they walked away, leaving a stunned Silas in the center of the floor, Sarah looked at her reflection in a passing mirror. She looked normal, but she could still feel that strange violet heat simmering under her skin, waiting. She had freed a wolf, but in doing so, she might have unlocked something far more dangerous inside herself. Back in the penthouse, Dominic went straight to the massive oak bookshelf. He pulled down a heavy, leather-bound ledger, the Codex of Lineages, and flipped to a faded page near the back. "I knew it," Dominic whispered. He spun the book toward Sarah. The entry read, "The Argenti, the Silver Bloods." "You aren't just human, Sarah," Dominic said urgently. "The Argenti were alchemists who forged the first chains to bind shifters. Over generations, the silver changed their DNA. They became immune to our commands. They became the only humans capable of judging us." Sarah touched the mark on her neck, her mind reeling. "My mother. She always said we had restless blood." "She was hiding you," Dominic said. "If Silas finds out, crash." The skylight exploded. Shards of glass rained down as ropes dropped from the darkness above. A helicopter roared overhead. 6 figures clad in black tactical gear slid down the ropes, landing with heavy thuds. "Run!" Dominic roared. He didn't wait. He shifted instantly, his tuxedo ripping apart as the massive black wolf burst forth to shield her. The guards fired, not bullets, but a net woven from shimmering silver wire. Dominic snarled, leaping to intercept it, but the net wrapped around him mid-air. Smoke rose from his fur as the silver burned into his skin. He thrashed and roared in agony, pinned to the floor. "Secure the beast!" Silas shouted, descending the final rope. He wore a smirk and carried a heavy shotgun. "I'll melt you down for glue, brother." One of the guards grabbed Sarah, twisting her arm behind her back. Silas walked over to her, staring into her eyes. He saw the flash of unnatural color. "Violet," Silas mused. "I knew it. An Argenti. You're going to make me very powerful, Sarah. Once I drain you dry." He raised the shotgun to knock her out. Sarah felt a heat surge through her chest, hotter than fire, colder than ice. It was rage. She looked at the silver net burning Dominic, and something inside her clicked. She realized the metal didn't own her. She owned it. "Let him go!" she screamed. She didn't just scream with her voice, she pushed with her will. The silver net around Dominic didn't break. It liquefied. The metal turned into harmless molten slag, dripping off Dominic's fur. The guards gasped, stepping back in horror. Dominic, suddenly free and furious, didn't hesitate. He lunged. The sheer violence of an unbound Alpha King was a terrifying thing to witness. Dominic lunged, tearing through the silver net like it was cobwebs. He hit the guard holding Sarah with the force of a freight train, sending him crashing through a glass partition. Silas didn't wait. He shifted mid-air, his bones cracking and reshaping until a massive grey wolf stood in the center of the room. He collided with Dominic, and the two beasts became a blur of fur and teeth, smashing the expensive Italian furniture to kindling. But Dominic was already wounded from the silver burns. He stumbled, and Silas capitalized, pinning the black wolf to the ground. Silas's jaws clamped around Dominic's throat, ready to crush his windpipe. Dominic shifted back to human form, gasping, bleeding, unable to throw the heavy wolf off. He locked eyes with Sarah and pointed a trembling hand toward the wall. "The chain!" Dominic choked out. "Sarah, use your blood!" Mounted on the wall was an antique medieval flail, a spiky iron ball on a long chain. Sarah didn't hesitate. She felt that violet fire surge in her veins again. She was an Argenti. Metal didn't just obey her, it was an extension of her will. She ripped the heavy weapon from the wall, but she didn't swing it. She commanded it. "Get off him!" she screamed. She whipped the chain. It moved with supernatural speed, lashing out like a striking cobra. The iron coils wrapped tight around the grey wolf's legs. Sarah yanked back, channeling every ounce of her rage into the metal. Silas yelped as his legs were swept out from under him. He hit the marble floor with a bone-jarring crunch. Before he could scramble up, Sarah whipped the chain again, binding his snout and paws together in an unbreakable iron knot. Dominic stood up. He was swaying, bleeding, but his eyes were cold, golden ice. He picked up a knife one of the guards had dropped and limped toward his bound brother. Silas shifted back to human form, trapped in the iron coils, looking up in pure terror. "Mercy," he wheezed. "Brother, please, you can't kill a submitting wolf." Dominic looked down at him. "You aren't a wolf, Silas. You're a rabid dog. And you threatened my mate." Dominic didn't kill him. Death was too easy. He leaned down and slashed the knife across Silas's Achilles tendons. Snap, snap. Silas screamed, a high, thin sound that shattered the silence of the room. "You are exiled," Dominic pronounced, his voice ringing with alpha authority. "You are stripped of the Blackwood name. You will never walk without pain again. You will never shift again. If I smell your scent in my city, I will finish the job." He signaled to the terrifying guards cowering by the elevator. "Get this trash out of my penthouse." As the sobbing Silas was dragged away, leaving a trail of blood on the marble, Dominic dropped the knife. His strength finally gave out, and he sank to his knees. Sarah dropped the chain and ran to him, crashing into his chest. "You're okay," she sobbed, holding him up. "It's over." Dominic buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent, rain, vanilla, and power. He looked at the wreckage of the room, then at the woman holding him. "I told them," he whispered against her skin. "I told them you were the most dangerous person in the room." The renovation of the Miller farm was finally complete. The old rotting porch had been replaced with mahogany. The barn was now a state-of-the-art garage housing 3 black SUVs. Sarah stood on the porch, holding a mug of coffee, watching the sunrise over the Blackwood forest. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform anymore. She wore a cashmere sweater and jeans that cost more than her old car, but she wasn't just a trophy wife. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from the Council of Alphas. Subject: proposed treaty amendments regarding rogue sentencing. From Office of Queen Sarah Blackwood. They listened to her now. With Dominic's muscle and her strange ability to neutralize silver, the one thing wolves feared, they had unified the West Coast packs. There was peace, a pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Dominic rested his chin on her shoulder. He smelled like cedar and rain. "Stop working," he murmured. "It's Saturday. Someone has to run the empire while you play fetch in the woods," she teased, leaning back into him. Dominic chuckled, the sound rumbling against her back. "Silas was spotted in Idaho. He's working as a janitor at a truck stop, limping." "Good," Sarah said. She felt no pity. Karma had been served. "I have a surprise for you," Dominic said, turning her around. "Another car?" "Dominic, we have too many." "No," he said, his eyes gleaming with that familiar mischief. "I found the trap, the one you found me in." Sarah frowned. "Why would you keep that?" "I had it melted down," Dominic said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple ring. It was made of dark, wrought iron, but polished until it shone like black diamond. "It used to be the thing that bound me to death," Dominic said, sliding the ring onto her finger. "Now it is the thing that binds me to you. Will you marry me, Sarah?" "For real this time?" Sarah looked at the ring. It was cold, heavy, and unbreakable. Just like them. She looked up at the Wolf King, the monster she had saved, the man who had given her the world. "Yes," she whispered, "but no more chains." Dominic smiled, kissing her deeply as the sun crested the mountains. "No more chains. Only us." And that is the story of how a simple act of kindness in the rain changed the fate of the Alpha King forever. From a muddy ravine to the top of the Blackwood spire, Sarah proved that sometimes the human heart is the strongest magic of all. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and instant karma, please destroy that like button, just like Sarah destroyed Silas. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. I post new dramatic tales every week. What would you have done if you found a giant wolf trapped in the woods? Would you have run, or would you have helped? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.